So before we conclude this section, I want to do a quick overview of the code that we were using in order to get all of this functionality. So at the very core of it was this web application that we were building that could pull information from various APIs. So mainly our Google Sheets was our main data source for our application. So we want to load content from there. And we also set up another random user that could populate our form information, so we don't have to always fill out all of that information, and we can have some fun with it, populating it, and so on. So next, we needed to send data into the sheet, so we could pull data from the sheet. We could also deposit data into the sheet. We used jQuery because this provided some amazing additional functionality for click events, as well as my favorite, of course, was the serialize that allows us to post data and allows us to really easily get that input information and serialize it in a format that we could really easily send over to the server. So within the jQuery, so we've got our document ready, so making sure the DOM has loaded, and then we've got a series of clicks, event listeners. So the first one here is, this is that random user. So basically what this one is doing is it's connecting to the randomuser.me API and it's retrieving back a random user. And we saw that with the random user, we get a bunch of useful data there. So a lot of it was similar to what we have within our form. So we're just making use of it and simply depositing that information where we could within our form. So that was filling the data. Next, we had submitting of the form. So we serialized all of the inputs. We have the same URL as we're doing get, but as long as we're doing post, we can send our data and deposit it into the form. So we weren't actually doing anything with the response. And of course, you're always welcome to do something with this response or you could even customize the response in the Google data. But there wasn't really a whole need to do that within the application that we were building out. So it was just important to know that it was successfully picked up and we could actually see if we want to do some troubleshooting, we could see how that data was being sent. When we send it over, we see that we get a response back. So we've got the data that we submitted being retrieved back to us, as well as holder, which holder was representation of that array that's actually deposited into the Google Sheets. So that was important to retrieve that information back, more for testing than for practicality use within the application. And then last but not least, we were loading data from the Google Sheet. So we're using shorthand AJAX here, get JSON. So it was as simple as having the URL and then returning back that data, and then we're doing something with that data. So this was being returned in an array format. We looped through all the array items, and then within the arrays, there was another array of values. So we looped through those and output them within a list format. So this made the response content very dynamic, because even if you add another column into your sheet, we're still pulling back all of the data. So sometimes you might not want this. It all depends on what you're trying to do with the data. And that was it for our front end stuff. So this was all that's running within the browser. And then we also worked on some backend coding. And the backend coding was done within Google Script. So this is a very versatile scripting language. And basically it allows you a whole bunch of power that you can incorporate your Google applications together with. So let me open this one up here. And so there's an online editor for it. And we found out that there's function do post and do get. So these work by default. And the way that they work is if you can return back content. So we saw that earlier with the Hello World where we're outputting some content. And then we added additional functionality. So we always kept that catch error, but we added additional functionality where we connected to the actual Google Sheet. So if you change this number, or if you change your sheet, you can change this number and connect it to a different Google Sheet. And of course, you're going to have to accept your permissions again, so keep that in mind as well. So we specified what sheet our data is located, the top first row of data so that we can get the actual headers. so that we have something to compare with the data that's coming in to make sure that we're actually depositing them into existing columns. So we loop through all of those headers. We check to see if those values existed from the E parameters. So this was the submitted data from the form coming in. So this was data coming in with an E object. And we have parameters. So we look through these objects, and if they didn't exist, then we set temp value as blank. If they did exist, then we set temp value as whatever the value of that form data was. And then we just simply pushed it into the array. And because this is an array format, we do sheet, and this is a class within Google Script where you can just simply add a new row. So it adds the next row, whatever the next empty row is, and because it's nice and neatly within an array format, it made it really easy to add within just this one line of code. And then over here, we were building back what we're responding whenever, what the user sees when in the response area of the application. So this, all of that stuff was basically building this out there. So we've got data, we've got holder, we've got data, and we've got holder. We can add a bunch of other ones as well. So whatever makes sense and whatever we want to utilize within our application, we can really customize that returned results. It has to be returned in a string format. So we're stringifying it, and then we're simply returning it in a JSON format. And literally, the do-get was literally the same thing, where all we're doing different is we're grabbing all of the available rows, -1, and all of the available columns. So we're basically building out a selection of all of these cells, and we're putting it in an array format, and then we're stringifying it and returning it back as JSON in the output of the get. So that was all there is to it. Of course, you do need to have a Google account for this. And I do encourage you to try it out, experiment a little bit, build upon this application, and see all the really amazing things you can do when you start combining different applications together with AJAX and JSON. Because with AJAX and JSON, it provides a perfect way to communicate between programming languages. And in this portion, we actually set up a working API that we can connect to from the front end, and we were using the Google spreadsheet as a database. So it's a great simulation, and there's a lot of room to expand on what we've gone over in the last lessons. And with Google Sheets, there's literally endless amounts of things you can do. You can send yourself an email when something gets added into the sheet. You can create documents, you can hook in your calendar. So it's literally endless, the amount of different things that you can do. You can also get maps, so you could pick up latitude and longitude, chart them out on a map, whatever you want to do. It's all available within Google Sheets. So go ahead, have some fun with it. Source code is included, so you can just copy and paste the source code and add it into your own application, experiment with it, and try it out.